So let's just add a little more detail to the people who are not familiar with the story, with the region, with the evictions, with the courts. So first of all, Sheikh Jarrah is in East Jerusalem. Maybe you can say, what is Jerusalem? Where is it located? What are we talking about in terms of regionally? And second, what kind of people that live there? So if you could talk about the Palestinian people. And um, we should also make clear that these evictions is literally people living in homes and their homes are taken away from them. I suppose technically it's legal uh, evictions, but you're saying that there's a asymmetry of power in the courts where the legal is not so much legal, but is politically and maybe even religiously based.
Yeah, I mean, the most important context here is that oftentimes Americans think that Israel and Palestine are some kind of two neighboring countries that live next to each other and they are at war. But the fact of the matter is, Palestinian cities exist all over the country, and it's just one country, it's just one infrastructure, and Israel is literally on top of Palestine. It was established on top of our villages in the late 40s. Uh, Now, according to international law, the eastern part of Jerusalem is under occupation. So Israeli presence and jurisdiction over the area is completely illegitimate. They say the evictions are legal because the settlers write their laws. So obviously they're going to allow settlements to expand. But according to international law, according to even US policy, um, Israel occupies the eastern part of Jerusalem. Its jurisdiction there is illegitimate. We shouldn't even be going to their courts in the first place, but we have no other option. When we're talking about Sheikh Jarrah, we're talking about Jerusalem, we're talking about generations and generations and generations of people who have lived there for the longest time, who now, even though, for example, me, I don't have a citizenship. I'm a resident, a mere resident. I have a blue ID card, even though my grandmother and my grandfather were born in Jerusalem, their grandparents were born in Jerusalem, um, even though we've lived there for generations. But Palestinians in Jerusalem, we are not citizens. We're just mere residents. Same thing with residents of the occupied Syrian Golan. They are not citizens. They are just residents in their own hometowns. This is an important piece, but all of this gets convoluted and lost in translation. And I think I would argue it's a lot more. It's a lot of the time it's dubious. It's malicious. The fact that these little pieces of context that frame the entire story get lost. I'll talk to you about something else. Just 10 minutes across from my neighborhood, Sheikh Jarrah, there's another neighborhood called Silwan. And the people in Silwan are also threatened with expulsion, but not through evictions, but through home demolitions. And if you look at American media or Israeli state media, you would read the headlines, Palestinians living in homes built illegally are going to face, their homes as they're going to be torn apart. What these headlines don't tell you, and even sometimes, most of the time, the substance doesn't tell you, that Palestinians seldom ever get building permit applications. In fact, recently a spokesperson for the Israeli military confirmed that it was 95% of building permits applications submitted by Palestinians in East Jerusalem and the West Bank are rejected by the Israeli authorities. And to make this even more absurd, the councilman who is responsible for rejecting and accepting building permit applications. His name is Yonatan Youssef, and he's an activist in the settler movements, and he's a Jerusalem council member. And he last week, following the expulsion of a Sublaban family in the old city of Jerusalem, he posted to his official Facebook account, Nakba Now, demanding a second Nakba, promising another Nakba. He has done so on many occasions. He has chanted with a megaphone just a few months ago, walking down the street in my neighborhood, chanting, "We want Nakba now." This is a man who has vandalized our murals, who has screamed Islamophobic slurs. This is literally a man in the government making these decisions, right? And this is similar to You know, Masafir Yatta in the South Hebron Hills. For those who don't know, it's a place in the occupied West Bank where Bedouin and cave dweller Palestinians have lived for generations. They have cultivated the land. And recently they were expelled from their homes. Over 1,000 people were expelled from their remote small villages. Again, if you're reading American media, they would say, it would say Palestinians living in firing zones were removed because they're living in a military zone. What these media reports will not tell you that in the 80s, the Israeli government purposefully classified many lands in the occupied West Bank as firing zones, as off-limit military zones, for the sole purpose of expelling the residents. And this is not some kind of conspiracy theory. This is declassified information that was released from the Israeli State Archive that was later reported on by Haaretz. Also, these reports will not tell you that the judge who rules on whether these people continue to live in their homes or not is himself a settler in the West Bank. And I'm not even talking about, you know, a loose definition of a settler, but according to international law, this is a settler living illegally in an illegal settlement in the occupied West Bank. This is the judiciary that we deal with, which is hilarious considering how it's being reported on in American media recently as some kind of beacon of progress and democracy that the new government is trying to undermine.
So there's no representation in the courts for the Palestinian people.
I mean, we have lawyers, but no, there's no, in fact, there is, for Palestinians with Israeli citizenships, for example, there's over 60 laws that specifically and explicitly discriminates against them.
So again, it's technically legal, the evictions and the demolitions.
Yeah, so was Jim Crow was legal also, you know.
When something is legal, it can also still be wrong.
Absolutely. History has shown us time and time again that legality does not necessarily mean morality, and the law, you know, is a bloodbath in many ways. It has been used and abused to facilitate the most horrendous atrocities. And in the case of the Palestinians, the law has served to facilitate and bureaucratize our ethnic cleansing.
Do you think there's people, judges, and just people in power in the judiciary that have hate for the Palestinian people?
I mean, I'm not really, the easy, simplistic answer is yes, but I don't really care about the contents of their hearts. What I care about the policy they enact, right? The laws they write and enact are hateful. Demolishing a person's home so you can have somebody from Long Island, New York, who's fleeing, you know, fraud charges. This is the case in my house. Live in their you know, front yard. That's hateful. So I don't need, you know, confirmation. This is something we see a lot, actually. You know, Palestinians and people who are pro-Palestine and just people who want to make a difference in how this cause is represented. We often run for the first opportunity to cite an Israeli being hateful. You know, the last Israeli prime minister said that he has killed many Arabs and that he has no qualms with it. Netanyahu has said a slew of racist, hateful things. Jabotinsky, the pioneer of Zionism, Herzl, one of the pioneers of Zionism, all have said horrible, hateful things. We also cannot wait to, you know, cite a confession from a former Israeli soldier whose guilty conscience is keeping them, you know, up at night. And we use all of these, you know, confessions or slip-ups as evidence to prove that this is a racist country that is enacting racist acts. But we don't need this because the material proof is on the ground. You see it in the policies that are enacted. You see it in how this regime has behaved for the past 75 years. I don't need, you know, confessions from the likes of Netanyahu to understand that his heart is full of hate.